isn't the way we planned. I wasn't supposed to forget your taste. Like nights spent listening to the latest episode of Columbia House Party on your old rooftop in Christie Pitts. Jake, what's up?
I miss Christie Pitts.
Yep, it's now too cold to hang out outside with our friends.
It's too cold, too full of skunks, and also it's cold.
Are you afraid of skunks? You being afraid of skunks is
No, I'm not.
Seems like a Jake thing.
The last time we were at Christie Pitts this summer, one single skunk chased out literally like 32 adults from Christie Pitts. It just kept going to everyone's blanket. And it was amazing how utterly powerless adult humans are with skunks. They were just like, I guess we're leaving now. Our night is over because of the skunk.
Well, here's the thing. I could beat up a skunk, but I would stink after, and I would rather just leave.
Yeah, like you could definitely take one. You would just smell a lot.
Yeah. Also, they're cute. I don't want to hit a skunk.
They are cute. Like skunks that their stink glands are cute little pets.
Yeah. Also, what a weird evolutionary thing to smell bad as a defense mechanism.
It smells real bad, though.
Yeah. Did that night at Christie Pitts, did also not a dog get skunked in your party?
Different night.
Oh, wow.
But with said dog was with us when all the outs were like, I guess we're leaving now.
Yeah, damn.
Yeah.
Well, what are you going to do? Well, what I'm going to do in this episode is just sit back because we have a guest who's better at, I don't want to say better at podcasting than you, Jake, but
no, he is.
This man in the host chair, the bass in the voice, the buttery tones that come out of him as he speaks, we are going to introduce him in just a little bit. First, last week, Jake, we discussed Taking Back Sundays, Tell All Your Friends, a pivotal album for me. This week's episode was more or less demanded by our guest. Jake, what do you have for us today?
So this week we're talking about a seminal album in the pop punk lexicon, an album that was not really one of quote unquote my albums when I was younger, but is weirdly for an audio medium, a very big visual album for me, as it would always be front of shelf when browsing the HMV punk section down at 333 Yonge Street in downtown Toronto. You couldn't search through any punk bins or shelves in the 2000s without seeing this album somewhere or reading about it on an online forum, as I did so many times as a youth. So today, we are talking about Saves the Days Through Being Cool.
Last night I dreamt you called Costa Rica. Yeah, the place you've been the last 2 weeks. Said I'll miss you, oh sweet boy. Will you come on down? I woke up to my cold sheets and the smell of New Jersey. Where do I get to wake up to you? Tonight I can't forget that I've got these open wounds in such a tray. Can't forget you've gone. Yeah, my lips have party ways that we're not going to protect this heart you have. Whoa, hey, hey, what can I do? Love to breathe it open and my spleen is dripping from my pants. Whoa, hey, hey, what can I do? Left me in the cold and I miss you. Miss you. Miss you.
All right, so Jake, to help us talk about Saves the Day and Through Being Cool, a gentleman who basically demanded this episode, we are joined today by Drew Fairservice. Drew, what's up, man?
Gentlemen, however excited you think I am to talk about Saves the Day, I assure you I am more.
I have in my notes here, I'm surprised you requested this and not like a Braid album.
Yeah, we had him in the thing for Braid, didn't we? In
Yeah.
the planning sheet.
We had been talking about Braid, which is great. And when that time comes, I will be happy to come back a second time and talk about Frame and Canvas for no reason other than I have a great story that connects Braid and subject of, I believe, a earlier episode of the show, which is Sum 41. But I will save that for then. But I don't know what prompted this other than I feel like this record's having a bit of a moment now. I mean, like last year at this time, we don't do last year at this time. They played a bunch of shows as like the 20th anniversary and played it front to back, but they were playing like 6,000 cap rooms of this record 20 years later, which is amazing. But I'm excited, gentlemen. Thank you so much for having me on to do it.
You guys probably know Drew anyway, but just in case, you can follow him at Twitter on Drew Groff. You can also listen to his Blue Jays podcast and subscribe to his excellently named newsletter, Vlad Religion, at fairservice.substack.com. Should have wore my Vlad shirt from you guys today, Drew. I dropped the ball. You also know Drew from yelling at me and Jake when we have the wrong music takes on our timelines. For example,
correct.
We have talked about in the origin story of Columbia House Party that one of the things that sparked us wanting to do a music podcast was like the once every 2 years, a bunch of us just end up re-ranking our Alkaline Trio albums online. Groff is a part of that. He has also yelled at me like a disappointed dad for once tweeting a positive thing about the band Bayside. So, Groff was... he was going to find his way on here at some point, and the other week he texted me and was like, hey, you guys should do a Through Being Cool episode. And I was like, is that you asking to do a Through Being Cool episode with us? And it was. So welcome, man.
I'm excited. I'm so excited. And the irony is, of course, that this is, which I believe this is almost like Jake's territory, but this is not my favorite Saves the Day record. But we can get into that as time permits.
That will come up.
I recall, I'm not spoiling anything here, but I do recall your hot Saves the Day take and how excited you get to let people know your hot Saves the Day take. So I can't wait for that part of the show. Before we get there, Drew, I know you mentioned just kind of throwing it out in this album, having a moment in the last little bit, but why Saves the Day for you? I know Chris Conley, is a hardcore kid who turned kind of pop punk melody guy. Maybe there's a little Groff in there. Why Saves the Day for you to come on the pod?
Again, I think that these records, this record is having a bit of a moment. There are a lot of different reasons for it. It Saves the Day. You mentioned so Chris Conley is a hardcore kid. It Saves the Day at their core, or in their origin, they were a hardcore band. They didn't sound like the bands that they toured with. They famously first toured with Bane. It was like their both of their first tours. They were both on Equal Vision Records when they put out their kind of first full lengths. So they were a hardcore band in form and in like aesthetic. And there's something about like hardcore kids when they move on to other things, they're still always hardcore kids, and like it always comes through.
Just ask Pete Wentz.
Well, just ask Pete Wentz. Just ask the other guy. He's in Sect, right? The drummer from Fall Out Boy's in Sect, or even like bands like Gatecreeper, which is like a death metal band that is made up of hardcore kids. And there's just something I can't even put my finger on it. And I'm like, I like that band and I don't like any other death metal bands, essentially. And so this was like, Saves the Day has this crazy trajectory. And the first record and then this record I really, really liked and like had a great affinity for this band. And then effectively we parted ways. We went in very different directions and I never really returned. But on top of this record having its 20th anniversary, Hate 5-6, Sunny Singh has put out 2 Saves the Day sets on his site that I follow religiously, where he shares new bands and old bands and nostalgic sets and digitalizes random old sets from Glassjaw, New Jersey from 2002. But he put up recently the last Bane show. On top of the last Bane show, Saves the Day played that show. And it is probably the greatest video, the greatest like 23 minutes of video that is on the entire internet, is that Saves the Day set at the last Bane show. So those things have like put them in front of me again and again. And I'm like, oh, right. I love these songs more than anything in the world. And who is
it who posts these sets? I want these. What
Hate
is this?
5-6 on Instagram, on Twitter, everywhere. Hate 5-6. Sunny Singh is his name. He is a brilliant computer scientist, basically, who has quit his job. I believe he has his master's in computer science from like Harvard or something like that, or Brown, who like left the rat race to film hardcore bands. He shoots them. He shoots multicam. He does audio right from the board. And he's been doing it for years, and now it's like his job. He has a Patreon. He has supporters all over the world, and so he'll go and shoot bands. He goes to Japan. He went to Japan with Jesus Piece last year and shot a bunch of Jesus Piece shows. Went to Australia, I think, with Knocked Loose and shot a bunch of shows with them. And but he also digitizes these old shows, and he shoots like the last Bane show he shot, and had to wait until just this past summer. The Bane last show was in 2016. They have a documentary that's just come out that you can rent on like Apple, whatever, on Apple, iTunes and on Amazon Prime and stuff, because there's a documentary about Bane in the last show, and they waited until the movie was ready to come out before they released the last set. Long story short, Hate56, the best account on Instagram, the absolute god of spreading the gospel of hardcore and bands that are hardcore adjacent. He's also not afraid to lean in. He's very political, very happy to share like some really interesting and important political perspectives of his own, and also people within his community and the hardcore community and the community at large, which gets him flack because some kids just want to mosh, right? But long story short, Hate56 put this Saves the Day set from the Bane show online, and then they played at This Is Hardcore last year or 2 years ago. No, last year, 2019. And they go and they play these hardcore shows like every 3 years. They just show up and play a hardcore show, and they play all old songs, and it is the greatest thing that has ever happened. Like there's no the Bane set in particular is absolutely without flaw. Like from the second they play the first chords of the first song to the minute that it's over, I am in ecstasy, just loving every second of it. So this put it in front of me, and then also just thinking a lot about this band, and they're still going, and they, I have this whole bit that I'm sure we'll talk about it, and it's about like code switching and how they can just like flip the script and like be this band, and people in that community accept them because for whatever reason. But so they show up and play a hardcore show, and then they go and he changes his voice and they play all their new songs, and they've got like 9 records or something by now, which is cool. And they play to a completely different audience who's no clue maybe where they've come from, but those who do know where they've come from and their journey, I think there's some appreciation. Let's go do your thing, sell records, get money, play those different kinds of venues. That's awesome. And then to be able to come back and do that and be the band that you maybe are in your DNA, it's really cool. It's really something that I appreciate. And then here we are. And then because Through Being Cool, it was that record that blew them up, I thought it'd make for a better conversation piece for the show.
Yeah, that's great. And I love the term code switching for that. And it's a term that I should have used a little bit more in some of the kind of like genre bending episodes we've done. Jake, before we dive into the album, your own connections. I know you said this was a binning, or I guess the CD era version of binning album for you. It is one of the best and like I think most iconic album covers from this era. Do you have a connection musically, or is it more just like I see this everywhere as a downtown teen?
Definitely more so the latter, but like musically now, I think I connect to it more. Like, not that I wasn't listening to this kind of music in like 2001, 2002, which I absolutely was, but I think I like just missed it. I'm just too young for it to have hit me.
But like certainly going back, you can hear like Take It Back Sunday, Fall Out Boy, Motion City soundtrack. They all borrowed from this, or were like, hey, if Saves the Day can do that, like maybe we can do that too.
Yeah, and I also think it was like more of less the music and more just the aspect of like being just too young to get the exposure to it. Because like listening to it now, and we were talking a couple weeks ago about sort of the middle Green Day albums of like specifically Insomniac, and like this isn't that far from that, which I was into at that age. So like I'm sure if I had heard it, I would have been like, this is the greatest thing I've ever heard in my life. But this is more just a band and an album they've been so like ubiquitous in scenes that I've been in throughout my life. And like whether it was, browsing online music forums in my teens, and they were always come up in like the what are you listening to right now topics, or whether it was browsing record stores or whatever. It's an album and a band that like I was aware of the album and the band long before I ever listened to the album or the band. And they've just sort of been ever present in sort of the pop punk sphere, at least if you're a certain age, of which I am.
For sure. For me personally, and again, not to give away any of Drew's rankings, but we're going to talk about the different Saves the Day albums at the end. For me, I came across Saves the Day through Stay What You Are, because At Your Funeral is the that jersey is hanging in the rafters of the LimeWire arena. There were very few songs as LimeWire as At Your Funeral by Saves the Day. But going back to this now, Through Being Cool is obviously terrific. And the Through Being Cool versus Stay What You Are versus maybe some other albums debate is a fun one. We're going to talk about Through Being Cool first, and we're going to talk about it after this. All right, Jake, Drew ate off your plate a little bit, giving us some of the hardcore background on Saves the Day, but set up Through Being Cool for us.
Saves the Day were formed in 96, 97-ish in the New Jersey area under the name Selfer, which was a four-piece which Chris Conley played bass and sang on. They changed their name in 1997 to Saves the Day. Chris Conley is the only member from the original lineup that is still in the band. They've had sort of an ever-changing lineup. To your point, Through Being Cool and the follow-up are the only albums in the entire Saves the Day discography that were released back-to-back with the same lineup. As Drew was saying, the first proper album, Can't Slow Down, was released in 1998 on Equal Vision Records when most of the members were all still in high school. This sort of caused some grief for them at shows as they were playing mostly hardcore venues and hardcore shows, and they were heckled on stage. Chris Conley told Wired in an oral history about Through Being Cool that we got heckled at every show. We were playing with hardcore bands. Everybody else is screaming, and we sounded like these little kids trying to sing. We were awkward teenagers. People would make fun of me for my acne. I would say here, they're actually a little older than I thought they were. Like, I knew that their thing was like, they're the high school pop punk band, but I actually thought they were still in high school when Through Being Cool came out, and that was the thing. So I was surprised to learn that they're actually like 2 years older than I thought they were.
Another parallel to Groff, sneaky old. Saves the day.
Wow. I feel I have nothing to say other than like that's probably true, but it relates to my connection to the band in that they are probably the same age as I am, or Chris is, I would guess.
That's all I was saying.
Yeah, I think that's fair. It also makes sense why like it has a stamp on you as well in that sort of hardcore-y kind of scene. Anyway, as you were saying earlier, Can't Slow Down is very much more so in the melodic hardcore vein compared to later work. They've said they were influenced by bands like 7 Seconds and Lifetime specifically, as they were Chris Conley's favorite band at the time. They recorded Can't Slow Down on their winter break of high school, and it's also the only record with Sean McGrath on bass, who I only mentioned because it was his idea to change the name from Selfer to Saves the Day. And as Drew said, I actually have in my notes, I'm only bringing this up because Drew is here. Their first tour was a tour with Bane, as we said, and by their own admission, Chris Conley's own admission, they kind of just were trying to sound like Lifetime as much as they could. They even have the same producer, Steve Evans, who produced a lot of Lifetime stuff, where Conley apparently chased after him specifically for that reason. And here is an idea of what they sounded like in the Can't Slow Down era. This is a song called The Choke.
Saying what I want to, 'cause it's not
funny how the band, and also sort of music critics talk a lot about that record as being like more in the hardcore vein. Like it is comparatively, but it's also, I see why they sort of got heckled at Bane shows.
Did they get heckled? Is that the, or were they like, how long, Drew, did it take for them to kind of be accepted in that regard as like you said, the not code switchers, but also, you know, an opener with a very different sound?
So my experience is that they were, me and my friends in particular, we love them. We just love them because that first record, the songs are so good. And some of my friends, some of my best friends in the world to this day, they played in a hardcore band that was like closer to hardcore, probably sound more like Bane. And they opened when Saves the Day, I think probably was the first time Saves the Day played in Toronto, and they played with a hardcore band called Fast Break. And so Save the Day was at that point the headliner, but they got heckled for weird reasons. And this is about as 1999 a story as I can tell. So Saves the Day, you know, you talk about that iconic cover to Through Being Cool. So they stood out a little bit to like hardcore kids, and especially hardcore kids from like Southern Ontario who would be on the internet and stuff because of the way that they dressed. There was a big thing about their shoes. They're wearing these creepers, and like, you know, they were like hardcore kids, but like hardcore adjacent. So there was this story about how the guy, Chris Conley from Saves the Day, used to wear sometimes on tour on stage, he wore red jeans. So the first time that I saw Saves the Day, which is honestly one of my favorite shows, my friend's band Notoriety played with Fast Break and Saves the Day, and they played at the Bloor Jewish Community Center at Bloor and Spadina, like upstairs, this teeny tiny little spot, no stage, playing right on the floor. I've got pictures of it like that because I used to, this again, very 1999, would bring a disposable camera with me to shows and like hold it up and take pictures of bands and people dancing and stuff. And you can see like the bank across the street that's not even there anymore at this hardcore show at the Bloor Jewish Community Center. But because of the way that they dressed, almost, they kind of would get grief from like hardcore kids who were maybe there to see Fast Break. So he used to wear red jeans. And I swear to God, in the most 1999 moment of all time, when they played, somebody who was just kind of sitting off to the side, kind of up side stage, had a sign that he had made, and in marker had written "Red Jeans 316," and then held it up. So he held up the Red Jeans 316.
I didn't mean to
sign.
laugh that loud into the mic, but
I was ready for it. This was the right audience for that.
Man.
So Red Jeans 316. So at one point, Chris was like a little bit taken aback by the fact that like, he was like, what does that mean? And then like kind of put this kid on the spot.
Especially if you're not a wrestling fan at that time.
Well, but
how do you even know what the 316 is
I feel like he
to?
got that much because, you know, that was peak Stone Cold. But I think he was more like, what's up, red jeans? He was probably not wearing red jeans at that show. But so that was the kind of shit that happened with them, that people would talk about the way that they dressed and like their kind of mannerisms and but the songs were the songs, right? The songs were huge. And at that show, at that tiny venue, the crowd, like the people that were there were singing along every single word, having a great time. They played a great set, and then that was it. And then they, you know, that was a hardcore tour. They were on tour with Fast Break. Fast Break is like a replacement level kind of youth crew band, which is fine. You know, for one, Fast Break record is a little bit interesting, but that was kind of the relationship that they had with maybe some people within that hardcore community. Was like, there just something was about them, but it's very much about, I think, a matter of geography too. So Chris, you know, in some of these interviews has talked about, and you've spoken about his relationship to Lifetime. So Lifetime was a band that my friends and I loved. And that was one of the reasons I liked this Saves the Day record so much, because I loved Lifetime, and they had just broken up. And Lifetime was like an East Coast melodic hardcore band that would get taken on tour by Good Riddance, right? Good Riddance from Fat Wreck and like that Southern California scene and sound. Good Riddance loved to prove to how cool they were all the time by bringing like actual hardcore bands on tour instead of like other Fat Wreck bands. And so my friends and I, who had kind of come up into that world, right? We got swept up through, you know, NoFX and Pennywise and Lagwagon and all that sort of stuff. And then that stuff all blew up and it started to open our eyes to different things. And Lifetime was one of those bands for me where you've used the word pop punk to describe Saves the Day, and it's like making my skin crawl because it's not, but it is, right? Like it is. I'm because I'm an old man who's an idiot. But Lifetime was different, and then Saves the Day was not different. They were not different at all. They were exactly like Lifetime. But for me, it was exactly what I needed. I loved. If you haven't heard Lifetime, and you're listening to this, and you're like that kind of sound, that melodic hardcore or pop punk kind of sound, you have to go and find Hello Bastards or Jersey's Best Dancers. Incredible records, really cool songs. They sound like shit because they were recorded like 25 years ago, but it's a bit of a different era you're stepping back into. But Jersey's Best Dancers is an incredible record, and so it was very much like Lifetime. So it all fit, right? It fit, and just like Lifetime, these bands evolved, but the kids stayed with them. And even a band like Lifetime, people used to give them a hard time. They have a famous sweater, Lifetime, that of a guy holding a bag of money. It says "Money is cool," and it's like supposed to be like a little guy running away. And that was because people accused Lifetime, a band that no one has heard of, realistically, they sold out, right? Because they pursued a somewhat more melodic sound. They weren't a hardcore band anymore. They had a different sound. They just wanted songs that people could sing along to as much as anything, right? I mean, a lot of Lifetime records for a lot of listeners would probably still be abrasive, but for those who have like been weaned on a certain sound, they didn't quite fit in, but they were also very much accepted and got to kind of, again, feature that aesthetic that made them look and feel a certain way, even though they weren't trying.
So from there, that's their kind of origins in the scene and what it was like as they were touring. But as we get closer to Through Being Cool, and especially in the years post Through Being Cool, they, I guess, somewhat ironically had this huge influence on a scene that they didn't come from. And, a lot of these bands that are gruff, to use the term that makes your skin crawl, a lot of bands that are inarguably pop punk and kind of took what Saves the Day was doing versus the hardcore scene and took it to, the next logical point in that transition. Jake, so what went into that between the time of the Choke and Through Being Cool? Let's speed us up to Through Being Cool era Saves the Day here.
So Can't Slow Down was, by its standards, quite successful. It sold 8,000 copies by the time Through Being Cool was released. They were touring around the country in a van that Chris Conley's mom bought because they were literally children. In early 99, they released an acoustic EP called I'm Sorry, I'm Leaving with their own resources. And then in November 99 is when they would release Through Being Cool. As I sort of quickly mentioned, they had significant turnover as a band between Can't Slow Down and Through Being Cool. Conley said in that Wired piece, we had like 3 different lineups touring on Can't Slow Down. Within no time, the only other original member left was drummer Brian. At the end of our very first full US tour, our guitar player quit, which then they brought in Dave Soloway, who would just drive the band to gigs when they were in high school as their guitarist. And he sort of expanded the sound a little bit. Chris Conley said that David wasn't a punk guitar player. He came from bluegrass, and his family would sit around singing folk songs and stuff at home, playing piano and banjo. They would also bring in Ted Alexander on guitar, who was the band's roadie. And Conley said that he spent so much time with them, they just gave him a guitar. And these sort of new influences, new members, and all that all contributed to the sound change. And I would also say that despite Drew's sort of hesitation at the pop punk term, a thing that we should talk about with this album that I don't think was intended at the time, as early adopters of these things usually aren't, but I do think now it's sort of, I think this album established a lot of pop punk cliches, let's say, or at least used them in an effective way that hadn't been used quite before, especially the way that Conley writes his love songs or breakup songs. And especially a song like this one, which rules, called Rock's Tonic, Juice Magic.
Let me take this awkward saw, run it against your thighs, cut some flesh away, carry this piece of you with me. So I can say to right is I hate you, it would be alright. We could see each other sometime. If I could somehow make you mine.
also as a certain Vimeo that Groff sent me in the lead up to this episode, just a killer set closer.
Yeah, I was surprised going back to this how, for lack of a better term, jawbreakery it is. Like I was expecting not quite this, I guess.
So were you expecting an even more like pop punky thing?
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
And I like this way more.
Yeah, like this song, Rock's Tonic Juice Magic, is kind of on the jawbreaker end. And then, you know, this album does go as far as like Hollyhock's Forget-Me-Nots, which I think we're going to talk about in a second, which is like, you know, if you were laying these from one end of the musical extreme to the other, Hollyhock's Forget-Me-Nots gets you like almost a Fall Out Boy.
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair.
Drew's probably really mad at me for saying
Drew's just like stewing.
No, absolutely. Like this record went like, again, so spoiler alert, Can't Slow Down is the best Saves the Day record. But Through Being Cool is so good because it's different, but it also feels natural because it doesn't sound, right. It's a lot harder to put your thumb on what it is. And any of those influences, you know, I think like any good genre band, the influences are immediate at first and then they disappear and you forget. You know, it's like trying to remember a dream where you're like, I thought I heard it, and then it's gone, and then you don't remember, and then it's just like this song. And the first Saves the Day record is not that. The first Saves the Day record is just unabashed Lifetime worship. We used to laugh because their bio on their website or wherever it said is like, we have a variety of influences from like The Police to Dag Nasty to Lifetime and something else. It's like, no, your influences are Lifetime. Like it's the beginning and the end. But this record, and it's very transitional, I think, in that it doesn't have an obvious sound like that, and the songs are a bit slower and they're rockier, and that guitar in that intro to Rock's Tonic Juice Magic, whatever it is like it's chunky, like it's thick, right? Like it's not as, especially even in Stay What You Are, when the guitar is like way more like way skinnier and way a lot easier to kind of wrap your head around and a lot easier to digest. Like it's still like a rockin' thing, and I really think that's what it is. It added a rock element that is easy to skip when you're doing like a genre band. If you're doing a Lifetime band or melodic hardcore, you're on tour and you're playing, you know, basements and VFW halls and whatever, you're not, it's a bold step to incorporate that rock thing. But this is a band that had this crazy, like, you know, rise and it just felt really natural and it makes sense. And, you know, you talk about that Hollyhock's Forget-Me-Nots, like there's that little guitar-y thing that's underneath the chorus that is like, that's like a leveling up, right? Like that's not on a Lifetime record. That's not on any of these other records. It's not the patented Blink-182 like one finger guitar solo. It's none of that stuff, right? It's just really, really good songwritery stuff. And I in my research for the show today, I was reading an interview and they were talking about the producer kind of, I think it was Steve Evans was the producer for that.
Yeah.
And he was like, or somebody said like, oh, we should try this. And they did it. And then they all just kind of looked at each other like, well, this is going to be different. And, but they knew that they were onto something ridiculous. Like that's such a good catchy song. And that little bit of like that kind of, you know, octave guitar part in Hollyhock's Forget-Me-Nots is just, it's unreal. And it's not like the record before. And it's not even as much like the records that came after, but it just really worked and it really fit. And I think that this record found a huge audience because it deserved it.
This is a spoiler for the ranking segment, and not surprising to listeners, I'm sure, given where the rest of my tastes lie, but Hollyhock's Forget-Me-Not is my favorite Saves the Day song, and this is that.
to both those points, I have a couple Chris Conley quotes about both that song we just listened to and also their influences. So we'll get into them. Chris Conley told Rolling Stone, I believe in a retrospective about this album, regarding going to a more rock sound, as Drew put it. He said, it wasn't like we made a conscious choice to change. I think that was just my taste evolving, but there was always a hard edge to Saves the Day. That's just a reflection of coming up in New Jersey and New York. We love bands like Lifetime, there you go, Gorilla Biscuits, and Bouncing Souls. Their album Maniacal Laughter is all over Through Being Cool. We could absolutely do a Maniacal Laughter episode, but that's another story. He said, when we were touring the...
I'll be there.
When we were touring I mean, sure. I'll talk about Bouncing Souls all day. He said, when we were touring the early days between 97 and 98, there were two seminal records that had come out. One was Foo Fighters' Color and the Shape, and the other was Refuse, The Shape of Punk to Come. Those two records were on repeat in the van and really wormed their way into our hearts and heads. When we went to record it, we just tried to match those tones and the aggressive energy of those albums, even though we were just kids from New Jersey. Throw in some Jawbreaker and Pinkerton, and you've got the cocktail that is Through Being Cool. And I think that sort of lines up pretty much exactly with what Drew was saying about the rock edge, especially if you want to take like those old Foo Fighters songs and combine them with Refused and Jawbreaker. That is kind of this record in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and the Pinkerton kind of sprinkle in references a good one too, because it's like, you know, obviously Weezer went the way they did, but if you go back and listen to that, it's like, it wouldn't be that hard to see a less commercially inclined Weezer, or a Weezer who like enjoyed making that kind of stuff a little more, going this kind of route. And I think they borrowed like the exact right stuff that made that work in terms of creating these melodies that were, you know, still, I don't want to say challenging, but like a little better musically than some of their contemporaries.
Yeah, I think that's true. And regarding Hollyhocks, I think this is actually the quote that Drew was talking about that he read. Hollyhocks is also Chris Conley's favorite song by Saves the Day. He said, it's my favorite. I remember the first time I played it in my mom's basement with Brian Newman, our old drummer. Brian and I went to NYU together. Then we would go back to Princeton on the weekends to see family and friends. It was so exciting to play just the two of us. Coming up with that one powerful riff was just really thrilling. Then when we added everyone in the band, it got really heavy, but so melodic and fun. Our producer, Steve Evitz, had this really cool idea to add an octave guitar over the chorus, and all of a sudden, that gave the song an extra dimension that felt like the Jackson 5. It's a stretch, but he said when we all heard it in the studio, we all just looked at each other, just wide-eyed, and we just knew that something great was about to happen. That song was the main reason why Brian and I decided to defer at NYU and just tour the album. So without that song, perhaps there's no later Saves the Day.
You're right, that Jackson 5, that's a bit of a stretch, but like that riff it's like a groove, right? Like you could see him, like you can imagine someone playing that bit on that part on the guitar and like bobbing your head, you know, like an old man in the guitar stenner who's just like playing, you know, an old, like a riff. Like there's a groove to it that you don't get in a Lifetime song or in a hardcore song. And if you listen to Can't Slow Down, it's not there. But it works, right? It works because the energy and all that, everything else that combines, it's beautiful. It's a great song. Not the best song on the record, but a good song indeed.
So yeah, we can talk about that in a little bit. Jake, I mentioned favorites and you also mentioned favorites. There was a connection here between two of my favorites in that the movie that I will go to bat for more from this era than any other is Can't Hardly Wait. And there is a Saves the Day,
there
Can't
sure
Hardly
is.
Wait connection you have for us, I believe.
Yes, indeed. So Saves the Day filmed a music video for the song Shoulder to the Wheel from Through Being Cool. And there is a weird sort of non-controversy surrounding it. And also it's just a weird kind of quote story here. So they made the music video, and on their Wikipedia, there apparently used to be an entry on it saying the band regretted making the music video. However, in that Rolling Stone piece that I was just reading from, Chris Conley was asked about this, and he said, no, not at all. What? I have no memory of feeling regret about that. I don't know where that started, but at least it can stop now on the record. Regarding the video, he said Can't Hardly Wait was the inspiration for the video, believe it or not. We had the VHS tape and we would watch it in the van. Somebody at Equal Vision knew the director who did the Blink-182 video for Damn It, so he flew out and he had the idea of driving us around town looking for this house party and picking up these random people. Then at the end, Saves the Day plays the house party. We got up really early. There was still snow on the driveway when we started filming. We invited a bunch of our friends from the New Jersey punk scene, shot it all in one day at our guitarist David's house, and we could have made a movie about the video shoot alone. However, in the Wired oral history piece I was reading from earlier, Conley also said, I remember the director going, here, sit in the front seat of this old Volkswagen. We're just going to have you lean your head against the window and look sad. And I'm like, this is really uncomfortable. And Newman followed that up by saying the band hated the video as soon as they saw it. So it's on the record both. It doesn't matter what's true, but it is kind of odd that they have this thought about it. Also odd that they made a music video at all, in my opinion, and odder that it's based on Can't Hardly Wait. But it sort of works for 1999.
The only regrets they could really have is that they didn't go all the way. They half-assed it. Look at Jimmy Eat World. Look at the video for the middle.
Yeah.
If you're going to put teenagers in a house at a party, you put them in your underwear and then you're rich. Like that. Jimmy Eat World knew what to do. Saves the Day, they didn't have the guts.
Jimmy World also had the hook on the middle there. It made them some dollars too, I think.
Well, yeah, but like teenagers in their underwear, like that's the next time that doesn't work will be the first.
How much could Ethan Embry really have costed for a cameo?
I mean, yeah, fair enough. That's fair. Anyway, that video was actually my first exposure to Saves the Day. If we're talking personal connection, that's one of those videos that's like, if you played me the video, I would know the video way before I knew the song kind of thing. It's just like, as we've talked before, whether it was, the Wedge or Punk Show or even just like late night 90s Much Music, that video is sort of like, okay, I remember this now. And anyway, here's the song that the video did, Shoulder to the Wheel. I love a pop punk bass riff, which that song has in spades. Anyway, there is another odd connection with this album. And that's also sort of brought, as Drew was kind of talking about their clothes, brought a bit of controversy to the band, which is the album cover, which famously has them sitting on the couch as the house party rages behind them. Chris Conley said that Brian and David went to school for photography, and I went along with whatever the artwork was because I have no idea what to do about art. The band just had their friends over for a house party and shot photos for it. The album cover is going to be this glossy image of the band, and we wanted to tell some story in the layout. The only reason I want to bring this up is because I think this is funny. One of Pete Wentz's best friends, Gabe Saporta, who also is the bassist in Midtown, is on the cover at the house party. I'm only bringing this up because Gabe Saporta told Wired, on the CD is a photo of me kissing my girlfriend from college. One of the other kids on that cover is an actor now. That actor is James Ransone, better known as Ziggy Sabatka from The Wire. He's the guy on the couch passed out. So Ziggy Sabatka on the cover of Through Being Cool, which I thought was funny. The label hated the album cover. The head of Equal Vision Records said that he felt it wasn't the right impression for the band. And Newman said, as soon as the cover came out, I was like, fuck, I wish we hadn't have done that. But now it's super iconic, so who knows?
I do think it's iconic. I think it's great. It's such on the one hand of the time in terms of like everyone, I don't know what kids do now, but like I have been to dozens of places that look just like that because, you know, I was so popular and had so many friends. And, but, you know, that whole like, I'm here, but I'm not really here aspect to it. You know, I think, you know, that's a cover that fits well with like any of those coming of age, late 90s, early 2000s comedies that we've talked about, you know, through our Blink episodes or Fall Out Boy episodes or whatever. Jimmy Eat World was another big one. So I think it fits. And I'm going to go look at that album cover for Ziggy while we take a break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about how this album was received, and we're going to let Drew loose for his hot Saves the Day takes. Coming up after this.
The tour and promotion for Through Being Cool first tour was with Snapcase and Kid Dynamite. Kid Dynamite, a band that I always used to get confused with Comeback Kid, even though I had a Kid Dynamite t-shirt from one of my friends when I was younger. They played a record release show with the Get Up Kids at the Drive-In and Midtown, which, damn, that would have been a good show. They went on a full North American tour in 2000, where they got in a very serious van crash that they've said almost ended their career, but they soldiered on, rejoining the tour in Seattle. By the time the first tour for Through Being Cool had ended, the album had sold nearly 50,000 copies, which for Equal Vision Records was a massive amount. Through that success, they then signed to Vagrant Records, which of course came with the accusations of selling out. However, Chris Conley told Rolling Stone that I don't think there was much DIY backlash from our scene. They'd say we slowed down, but not much else. I don't think anybody had that kind of scope at the time to be able to know something big was happening. We would drive down to Florida for shows, and the band that would open was New Found Glory. They became your friends, and the next time you went down there, you'd meet their friends, like Dashboard Confessional. Then you went out to the Midwest, and you'd be on a bill with Alkaline Trio, and then you'd join them on tour with Face to Face. There was never a focus on the finish line or mainstream success. The reason the emo and pop punk world thrived is that it was real people all doing things they loved and telling their friends. It was relatively well received at the time. AllMusic's Vincent Jeffries gave it a 3 out of 5, saying the songs have issues with being too obvious, sappy, or both, but Conley pulls it together with plain spoken honesty. It also has a 3 out of 5 from Punk News, which praised the band for finding their sound after just trying to sound like Lifetime. The real lasting reviews, I would say, are more retrospective and its legacy. In a retrospective article for Brooklyn Vegan, Andrew Satcher wrote, "If you never heard Through Being Cool before, it might not be immediately clear from a first listen in 2019 why it's so important. If it sounds a little too regular, it's because the influence became so widespread. If the lyrics sound a little juvenile, it's because Chris had literally just graduated high school when he wrote them. If high school is very far in your rear view, the album might not be for you, though Stay What You Are in Reverie might be. It's not Saves the Day's best record, in brackets, that would be Stay What You Are, which straddles the perfect middle ground between where they started and where they ended up, but does remain their most classic, the most important, and possibly still the most influential." To that point, NME listed Through Being Cool as one of the 20 pop-punk albums which will make you nostalgic, which is a weird name for a listicle. BuzzFeed put it at number 5 on their top 36 pop-punk albums to hear before you die list, and Patrick Stump put it at number 10 of 10 albums that changed his life, and said that he would not have been in Fall Out Boy if not for the album, which you can either say is a good thing or a bad thing depending on your tastes. Stereo Gum also listed Rock's Tonic Juice Magic as one of the 30 essential songs from the golden era of emo. And Saves the Day, before we get into our little debate section, I'll just say that Saves the Day remain active today. Tons of lineup changes. They have 23 total musicians listed on their Wikipedia page. They released Stay What You Are in 2001, In Reverie in 2003, Sound the Alarm in 2006, Under the Boards in 2007, Daybreak in 2011, a self-titled record in 2013, and 9 in 2018. The number, not spelled out, so it's not the same as the Blink-182 record. And they sound like this today. This is a song called Rendezvous.
Before the fall, it was the summer before 900 parking lots, 81 songs in a row. Our international tour, coffee castles in English sand. Run at the light stage, or live on clay. Get up and grab our guitars in basements and backyards, singing together under the stars. It's such a beautiful world, life is beautiful. Sometimes it's all too much to think that we're not alone. I look to you to my left, look to me to your right. Look together till the future standing side by side. So come on, let's go wherever we wanna go. Climbing the back of the van, where all the world is a blur. Listen to video games, are just like hell. And rolling the windows down, sing as loud as we can. Hands up, head down, both eyes closed. Breathing heart pounds.
Jake, you have no idea how upset I was when I saw your run sheet and it did not include At Your Funeral in the post-album
I debated it,
part.
but I felt that there's so many goddamn Save the Day records that let's just say what they sound like most recently, which is aggressively fine.
I have not really listened to, like, I have not gone deep on anything since Reverie in 2003. Drew, did you kind of stick with them throughout? Are you familiar with any of the newer stuff, or is this like Stay What You Are or Reverie is where you cut off?
Oh
with
no,
them?
I put on At Your Funeral in the car the other day, and I realized that I've probably heard that song 5 times in my life. I didn't even stay with them through Stay What You Are at all. So this band blew up, right? Like right in front of me and like
Yes.
under my feet in a way that I, especially now, support. But I'm going to take you through like a little bit of a timeline in terms of like my experiences watching Saves the Day. So as I mentioned, I saw them in probably 1999 at the Bloor Jewish Community Center on the floor with a hardcore band. Incredible show. The next time I saw them, I think might have been a year or so later. They were on tour with H2O, which is like a New York hardcore cosplay band that fronted by a now canceled Toby Morse. Anyway, H2O was they used to play like 180 shows a year. H2O just like toured and toured and toured, and they were on Epitaph, and they got as big as they could. But they took Saves the Day on tour, and I saw them at the Opera House. So now that's a pretty big step up in terms of venues. And then the next time I saw them was in 2001. I saw them at Crazy Fest in Louisville, Kentucky, where they were one of the headliners on Sunday. So Crazy Fest was like a hardcore festival that was put on by Initial Records back in those late 90s. So I think this might have been the 4th year of Crazy Fest, and so it was like a big deal as a hardcore festival in that it was outside, and there were like maybe 1,500 kids there, or 2,000 kids, I don't know. And the Saturday night was like lots of heavy bands, but all the bands that I loved at the time. It was like just perfect. That's why we got in the car and drove all the way to goddamn Kentucky to go to a fest. And then it was Saves the Day and Dashboard played on Sunday. And I was, I'm not ashamed to tell you, way too fucking cool to watch these bands in this setting. Like it was really awkward. And like for me, because the whole thing about them being like hardcore kids and like playing for hardcore kids, the crowd at this show wasn't. And it was very evident to me. And I was like, okay, they were moving on to something else now. And like, I was judging the kids around me because I was 21 and like knew everything that there was to be known in the world. And I was just like, yeah, no, this is not, I'm not really into this anymore. The Dashboard set was one of the worst things I've ever seen in my life. There was some kid crying. This kid is crying watching Dashboard.
Was it Chris Caraba?
No, Chris Caraba was like, "What are you crying for, dude?" Like called him because the guy
was it Blake?
Yeah, no, I don't know who it was.
It might have been me.
It might have been you. Might have been you. And the vibe was different, right? They were blowing up and moving on, and it was like, oh, cool, okay. Next time I saw Saves the Day was opening for Weezer at the Bell Center in Montreal, like a year later, where I drove from Toronto, and my friend, she was going to school at Dal, and she wanted to go see Weezer, so it was like, okay, well, you don't have to, I'm the anti-Jake in that you don't have to ask me twice to get me to go to Montreal, so off I went, and we went, and I saw Saves the Day in a hockey arena, right? This is a band that like 2 years before I saw in a Jewish community center, now they're playing in a hockey arena. I'm like, this is cool. I think that's probably going to be it for me, just because I was very much into like the Saturday lineup at Crazy Fest, which is like metalcore bands and heavier bands, and just they had gone in a direction which again I especially now support what they were up to, but it just wasn't for me anymore. The vibe was so different, and I was looking for heavier stuff. And then eventually I moved overseas, so I couldn't really go see Saves the Day anyway for a couple of years. But the point is that was like the trajectory.
Did they not tour Korea?
They didn't tour Korea. I saw In Flames in Korea.
Nice.
Wow.
And I saw lots of Korean hardcore bands. We used to go to Korean hardcore shows all the time, which was awesome. But my friends who had been there the year before, they got to see Envy in Seoul, which was it changed all of our lives quite literally, because they all came back and they had like armloads of Envy CD records, and they were like they're CDs, they're not records. They were like thrust them at us. They were like, holy shit, this fucking band, and it blew all of our minds. But yeah, so that was it.
How long were you there for, Drew?
I was there for about 14, 15 months. And then I traveled, like bummed around Southeast Asia for a while after that. Just like Thailand and Cambodia and Singapore, Malaysia.
You and Eric Thames bringing hardcore to the, to Seoul.
Hey, there was a huge and vibrant hardcore scene in Seoul, and it was great. And they accepted. I got really lucky because I mentioned my friends had been there before, and they had kind of got connected with some of the hardcore kids, the Korean hardcore kids. Some, a few of which may have, spent some time in the US and like brought records back and t-shirts. They were like all these hardcore kids. And so because we were like the only foreigners at most of these shows, and we were hardcore kids. We would show up in like Bane shirts and Shai Hulud shirts and whatever else. And then we would hang out with them after. All these hardcore kids, everyone would go play these shows, and we would all go eat and drink like, Korean shit, like sitting on the floor, getting blind drunk, drinking soju. They weren't straight edge kids. And, but it was great. The scene was super vibrant. There were tons of really good bands. Some bands were like tough guy bands that half of them sounded like Madball. A bunch of them sounded like Poison the Well. I had the time of my life. But that separation, so when I was gone, that's when Stay What You Are came out, and then they were like this like TV band. And I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. I came back and back to North America, and I was like still, looking to be part of going to shows, and there were different bands, and Saves the Day just kind of wasn't really on my radar anymore. Bless them for continuing to crank this stuff out. But then as I go back and listen to it a little bit, I'm like, oh my gosh, I really don't like this. It's really, really, really bad. He completely changed his vocal style. And I was like, whoa.
Right. But At Your Funeral is like a Yellow Card song, and you like Yellow Card a lot, don't you?
Yes, of course I do.
I'm just curious where the line, because like this came up, we did.
Oh yeah,
Card.
by the way, Sarah Finley wanted me to tell both of you.
Yeah,
Sarah Finley was
me.
screaming that we were not crediting her and Drew for being Yellow Card fans when I said they were a Blake band.
But this is it's surprising that like even going like I guess what's surprising is that either somehow you like Yellow Card cut through to you when Stay What You Are wasn't, or you've gone back to those and for whatever reason you like Yellow Card but not Stay What You Are. And I wonder how much of that is like maybe your anchor point for Saves the Day originally, or you just really love the violin, or I don't know what's going on there.
I wish I knew. It was a little bit jarring to have been that been such a big part of my life, like going to hardcore shows and like we would drive. I went to Hellfest in Syracuse. We went to Crazy Fest. My friends were in bands. We would go to Buffalo to see, Elliot and the Promise Ring. And there was just a big part of who I was. And then to go away and come back and have that world have like exploded. And then I come and I'm sitting on my parents' couch, and then I turn Much Music on, and there's the Ataris on TV. And I was like, what the fuck is going on? so
Boys of Summer, buddy.
Well, it is a huge. They
Black
do it
flag
a great
sticker on a
justice.
Cadillac. Got to change it up.
But one of the things that happened also was that all the second wave, the B-sides and Say Anythings and Fall Out Boy, all that stuff completely missed me, because to me it sounded like a Xerox of a Xerox of a Xerox. Like I liked Saves the Day because they sounded like Lifetime, and I kind of was with them for a bit of the ride, and then they changed, and then there was like an army of bands that just like were copying what I knew to be a copy. So I was like, yeah, no, I'm not gonna do this. I like these other bands that are shittier and metalier and will be gone in 6 months, but like it just sort of missed me, except for Yellow Card for whatever reason, because as I mentioned previously, I kind of came up through like that Southern California, like NoFX Fat Wreck sound. And Yellowcard did that, but they did it in a really fun way. And also the hook in Ocean Avenue is like enormous, like bigger than the whole world. So you can't fault me for getting caught in that net.
No, I don't fault you at all. I call them, and you're gonna hate this, I call them the Paul George of pop punk, where like everyone agrees that they're good, but they don't have stands. Like Paul George is the only NBA player without stands. There are Davis Bertans stands and Aaron Baines stands on NBA Twitter, and there are no Paul George stands. Anyway, so I apologize to you and Sarah Finley for not appropriately identifying that you guys are the lone Paul George stands.
If I may, I play ball in Paul George 2.5s. So there you go.
Yes, that came up on the
Nice
podcast
shoes.
as well. That
Yeah, the
those
best
are,
thing about him is the shoes.
Yeah, he has a very comfortable basketball shoe that is wasted on Paul George. Apologies to Paul George. Anyway, Jake, we got to do some ranking here and let Drew fire off his hot take.
Let's do it.
I would probably, on my side, argue that Through Being Cool is the correct choice as kind of like the iconic album from Saves the Day. I think like in our discussion about just like how well, whether you like that it did this and the bands that follow or not, just like how well it bridges eras of stuff that sounds or is influenced by this same kind of stuff. I personally had more of a connection to Stay What You Are because At Your Funeral is my first introduction to them. I don't have a strong take on which of those is the better album, but Drew, I know you have a strong take on what the best Saves the Day album is. You mentioned it earlier, so refresh us here and give us the why.
Cancel It Down is the best Saves the Day album. In that is the one that I like the most. I just love the songs so insanely much. It has, they mentioned Gorilla Biscuits because the opening riff of the record of Undecided is a flagrant ripoff of Gorilla Biscuits, the first riff for New Direction, which is an iconic hardcore song on an iconic hardcore record. They have no qualms in ripping off that same like but it works so well. The record is so fun to sing along. I love the songs on Cancel It Down so much. I love that it has that melodic hardcore energy. I really do like Through Being Cool. I do. But the dirty secret of Through Being Cool, and it's something I joked about one of my friends in one of my like retired hardcore guy group chats, was we were talking about those Saves the Day shows where they play Through Being Cool from start to finish. Is you can leave after the fifth song. That's like the not supposed to say that out loud. But once Holly Hawks Forgets Me Nots is done, it's like, peace, I'm going home. I'm going to beat the traffic, because the second half of it has got some good songs, but they're forgettable. While the first 5 songs in Through Being Cool are like unbelievable, but I don't think it's as strong, and it doesn't have the same finisher as Cancel It Down, which has Jody, which is like unreal. Just such an amazing, fun, powerful song that they play sometimes, but not all the time, which is kind of neat because it has such a big, like finished, big cheesy, kind of almost corny over the top. But you can kind of see that they love there's that rock element. There's that let's put on a bit of a show and have some fun. And that's why I think Cancel It Down is better. And I love the way it sounds. It's produced really well. And it just hit me at the right time in the right place. Bane, I in honor of doing this, I put on like one of my oldest Bane hoodies, my favorite band of all time, and they just they played so well together, and it's just like just the right time, the right place, the right record. And again, watch that Hate 5 set from 2016 and blow your mind.
Also, the Vimeo you sent me.
That's the one. That's the one.
They're set from that is the one. Okay,
that's the one. So it's interesting because as I mentioned off the top, that Hate 5/6, there's 2 Saves the Day sets because they do that thing where they just can show up and play a hardcore show and have everybody welcome them. So they did that in 2016, and it was very last minute. So the Bane toured, and they were a hardcore band, and they almost like defied. They were just a hardcore band. You couldn't really slot them into. They weren't a metalcore band. They didn't have lots of big breakdowns. They weren't as heavy as some of the bands, but they weren't a pop band. They were just a band that people really liked, and Bane became something that was more than a band. And I think I'm emblematic of that. My friends and I attached ourselves to this band, and it sort of like carried us through later parts of our life where we would always just go to Bane shows, even though maybe didn't love the last Bane record, maybe didn't love the one that came before, but there was just something about going to see those shows. So because they had this relationship with Saves the Day, there was a band that dropped off that last Bane show, which was something they spent 2 years building up to this show. So Terror dropped off, and then they just said, "Hey, Chris, do you guys want to come play?" And he was like, "Yep." And they played, and I swear it's like 9 songs long, 9 songs this set. But again, they played only songs from those first two records, and the sound, because it's Sonny Singh, Hate 5-6, is just like there's a bit of board sound and a bit of like the mic that might be on the camera. So there's a ton of crowd in it, and it is like nothing I've ever heard in my life. And I've been to a million shows like that, but like the sound is, when they play it's called Undeciding. It's the first song on Can't Slow Down. And the second song they played is You Vandal, which is the second song on Through Being Cool, which is my favorite song. And it's way faster than the rest. It sounds a little bit out of place with that record, but that gets to the chorus, and to like coin a wrestling term again, it's like a nuclear pop. Like it explodes the roof off of the building, because there's like 2,000 people there, and they're having the absolute time of their lives, screaming the chorus back at him. The guys in the band, again, the other guys, they're not like hardcore kids anymore. The band has been through so much. They're just playing, and they're having the time. They're just doing their job, essentially. Chris is like, there's no security, no barrier. So the show is like 25 minutes long. And if there's 300 stage dives, there's not one. Like there's constant stage dives, constant sing-alongs. He's having a great time. Everybody there is having a great time. At one point in the set, he turns to Zach, who's a guitar player from Bane, and he's like, "How much time do we have left?" And he's like, "You can play for as long as you fucking want. Like, just keep going." And they only played like 3 more songs. It's just the most beautiful video. I love it. And then in 2019, they played at This Is Hardcore, which is a hardcore fest in Philadelphia every year, which is like, they always bring some of these older hardcore bands that kind of come out, and they have a great mix and match of like new and old. And it's just tons of bands, and it swells to, often there's a big reunion that'll be at the end of the show. And this one year it saves the day. Same thing. Everybody there's so excited to see them. They know what they're there for. Everybody who's watching knows what they're there for. They don't play at your funeral. They play only the first 2 songs. And in fact, they play like demo songs, and they play like electric versions of the songs off of I'm Sorry I'm Leaving. And they just play. And so that set, they played a little bit too long, but the production on it is almost too good, in that there's not as much crowd. And I was a little bit disappointed, because that sound of those people in that venue in Worcester, Mass, at that Bane show, it's just like the most beautiful thing in the whole world, watching everyone have the time of their lives for 30 minutes, watching these weird guys that sound like, I don't know even how to describe what they sound like now. I listen to a podcast called Axe to Grind, and there's a guy, Patrick, who's in the band Drug Church, and he's one of the hosts of that show. And he talked about some of the guys in his band listen to Saves the Day. So my review is his review, which is, it sounds like they recorded this record in the van. Like, it's so bad, one of the late Saves the Day records. And it's cool if kids go and buy them and they go and play shows, awesome. But for them to be able to show up and like play these hardcore shows means a lot to me. And I hope it means a lot to them.
Drew, we are at the part in the podcast where we have to pick a song from this album for our mixtape. Columbia House Party has a living mixtape that brings one song on from each episode. So we generally defer to the guests there in terms of the song that you think best represents this episode and the discussion we've had, or your relationship to the album in question. So we put it to you first. Jake has the right to disagree, of course. But Drew, what song would you put on the mixtape?
I want to put on You Vandal, because it is the song that I like the best. And I think it's the best marriage of the 2 records that I really like. If Jake wants to put on Hollyhocks Forget-Me-Nots, I will not have any qualms with that, because it is a really fun song, and we've talked about it a lot, and it really shows what kind of the record is and was, and what the band became on their like meteoric rise. And then sort of, again, they're still out there, they're still playing and grinding it, and it's because of the strength of songs like that one. So if Jake wants to go with Hollyhocks, I'm cool. You Vandal is the one that I would pick, because it's the one that means the most to me. All
right, Jake. So as good an argument Drew makes for Hollyhocks Forget-Me-Nots, where do you land? Are you okay with You Vandal making the mixtape?
Yes. I usually defer to the guest, and while I agree with all of Drew's points about the quote-unquote importance of Hollyhocks, both to the band and to the genre as a whole, I like going with what means stuff to the guests, because this whole show is about what means stuff to us, and like, who really gives a shit about the history outside of that. So let's go with You Vandal.
And You Vandal is also a part of that set of the show that Drew was just talking about, and that he sent me the video of. So I'm going to, as soon as we're done, go watch the first couple songs of that set list so I can finish it out. And the second song on it is You Vandal. So looking forward to that. This is on top of the part of the podcast where we add You Vandal to the mixtape, the part of the podcast where we thank producer Dylan. Thank you to Dylan for all his great work making this podcast possible. And we want to thank Drew Fairservice, who you can follow at Drew, G-R-O-F, Drew Groff, on Twitter. You can subscribe to his newsletter, Vlad Religion, at fairservice.substack.com. Drew, thank you so much, man. This was great. And we are going to... You were so well prepared and had so many great insights. We're going to invite you back on like an annoying number of times, especially if and when we can ever get back to recording in person, to give you a reason to come back into the city.
Well, I'll have to pack a bag.
From the region.
I'll pack a bag. I know, I live in the county, excuse me. You're from the region. It's absolutely my pleasure. I could talk about this kind of stuff all day until I die. Anytime, literally anytime, I'm happy to come on and shoot the shit about good records and fun bands and old shows.
All right, well, we appreciate it, man.